6 Johnny Carson guests who were too honest on TV. America thought it knew Johnny Carson, the perfect host, the master of ceremonies, the keeper of late-night decorum. His guests were supposed to stick to the unwritten rules. Promote your project, tell a funny story, laugh at Johnny's jokes, and save the real dirt for after the cameras stopped rolling. But some guests didn't simply cross the line. They erased it altogether. In the sanitized world of network television, where even married couples slept in separate beds and bathroom humor meant jokes about hairspray, The Tonight Show would occasionally erupt into something raw, confessional, and far too honest for 1970s America. These weren't just celebrities who could curse or make a risque joke. These were people who shared intimate truths, confessed to scandalous behaviors, and named names in ways that left Carson scrambling for the commercial break button. Johnny's greatest skill wasn't getting people to talk. It was knowing when to shut them up, explains former NBC executive Thomas Reynolds. But some visitors came prepared to clean their consciences out in front of a national audience. They weren't being provocative for shock value. They were sharing their real lives, consequences be damned. And that was infinitely more dangerous. The difference in intent was what separated the guests, who had no filter, from those who were too honest. No-filter guests loved pushing boundaries and breaking rules. These truly honest guests, however, were another story altogether. They were using The Tonight Show as a public confession booth, a therapy session, and an autobiography, all rolled into one nationally televised moment. Number 1. Shelley Winters. The Hollywood bedpost, Shelley Winters. Shelley Winters wasn't just an Academy Award-winning actress. She was a walking, talking Hollywood tell-all who treated Johnny Carson's couch like her personal confessional booth. Long before Kiss and Tell memoirs became standard celebrity fare, Winters was naming names, sharing intimate details, and confirming Hollywood rumors with a candor that left network censors reaching for the mute button. Winters told Johnny she slept with most of Hollywood and never regretted it, explains entertainment historian Margaret Collins. This wasn't just shocking because of the content. It was revolutionary because Winters was a respected Oscar-winning actress openly discussing her sexual history at a time when women were expected to maintain at least the pretense of modesty, especially on network television. What made Winters' revelations particularly explosive wasn't just their explicit nature, but her willingness to name names of her famous partners, turning vague gossip into confirmed history directly from a primary source who seemed utterly unbothered by the potential fallout. She named names, including Marlon Brando, on air. Collins continues, in an era when publicists carefully managed stars' images and networks actively avoided celebrity scandals, Winters' casual confirmation of her relationship with Brando along with many other Hollywood legends violated the industry's unwritten code of protecting famous reputations. She wasn't just airing her own private life, but implicating others who might have preferred discretion. Winters' approach to these revelations was striking for its lack of embarrassment or regret. Without the confessional mode which would later become common in celebrity interviews where stars admitted past indiscretions with appropriate expressions of remorse, Winters spoke about her romantic history with unapologetic satisfaction. She once quipped, "Some stars acted. I acted up in their beds," Collins remembers. That deliberate wordplay showed a comfort with her sexual history, presenting her relationships not as mistakes or scandals, but as natural aspects of her Hollywood experience she looked back on with fond amusement rather than shame. Carson's reactions to such revelations became part of the entertainment. His wide eyes, nervous laughter, and occasional attempts to guide the conversation to safer ground created a comic counterpoint to Winters' unflinching honesty. The visible discomfort of television's most comfortable host underlined how far Winters was pushing against the medium's unwritten boundaries. She didn't flirt, she confessed. And it got messy. This remark captures what was central to Winters' practice, not the teasing suggestiveness that female guests frequently used on the shows, but frank confessions about her intimate life spoken with the matter-of-fact candor of one sharing a recipe rather than revealing sexual history on national television. Number 2. Richard Pryor. The raw confession, Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor didn't just push boundaries on The Tonight Show. He obliterated them. turning Carson's couch into a confessional where he shared stories so raw and personal that network executives reportedly begged Carson never to ask him certain questions again. Unlike comedians who played with taboo topics for shock value, Pryor brought genuine lived experience to television that had never seen anything like his unvarnished truth. Pryor talked explicitly about drug binges, sex parties, and nearly burning himself to death while freebasing, explains comedy historian Dr. James Morrison. What separated Pryor's candor from mere provocation was its autobiographical veracity. He wasn't talking about these things to be outrageous or salacious, but as part of sharing his real life, including parts that hurt, with an honesty television simply wasn't built for. The most extreme case was after Pryor's near-fatal accident in 1980, where he set himself on fire while freebasing cocaine, in a freak accident that left him with burns over 50% of his body and a long, agonizing recovery. Rather than shying away from this tragic accident or making some sanitized version for television consumption, Pryor talked about it with stunning frankness on The Tonight Show. He said, "You ever light your face on fire? That's when you know the night went too far." Morrison continues, this wasn't just pushing the boundaries of acceptable television content. It was turning personal trauma into both comedy and authentic human testimony about addiction, self-destruction, and survival. The audience's reaction mixed uncomfortable laughter with real shock at hearing such raw truth on network television. Carson's reaction to Pryor's revelations showed the host's own complexity. He recognized the extraordinary value of authentic testimony, yet was aware of his responsibility to maintain a program that would not invite network intervention. This balancing act created some of The Tonight Show's most electric moments, with Carson at once egging Pryor on toward honesty and keeping an ear cocked for content that might cross the line from daring to potentially unbroadcastable. Carson couldn't stop laughing or stop the FCC, Morrison says. This tension between Carson's evident appreciation of Pryor's authenticity and his awareness of broadcast standards created a fascinating meta-narrative during their interactions. Viewers could watch Carson navigating between his roles as entertainer and network employee responsible for maintaining program standards. What was particularly significant in Pryor's revelations was not only their explicit content, but also their unapologetic rendering of experiences that are usually excluded from the mainstream, let alone when expressed by a black performer to an audience predominantly white. His readiness to address racism, police harassment, drug addiction, and sexual experiences introduced perspectives onto television that the medium had systematically ruled out. He brought his trauma and turned it into dirty gospel. This remark epitomizes the kind of transformation that Pryor's approach enacted, the way in which he could raise possibly sensational material into something nearing testimony or witness. Number 3. Joan Rivers. The name dropper. Joan Rivers. Joan Rivers turned celebrity gossip from a backstage whisper to a frontstage event, using The Tonight Show as the platform for revealing industry secrets that publicists, studios, and network executives had kept from public view for decades. Her willingness to expose realities that Hollywood had cloaked in secrecy, often naming names, made her appearances both thrilling and anxiety-inducing for Carson and his team. Rivers roasted her own sex life, her plastic surgery, and called out cheating actors by name, notes television historian Thomas Henderson. What made her different from typical talk show banter was not the X-rated nature of her speech, but its specificity. Rivers did not stop at general celebrity misbehavior, but named particular stars for their specific transgressions, violating Hollywood's unwritten code of mutual protection. Unlike gossip columnists relying on unnamed sources or vague blind items, Rivers posed as a first-hand witness to the behavior she described, making her revelations carry an authenticity that made them particularly problematic for celebrities who might otherwise have dismissed them as mere rumor. Her insider status as a working comedian with access to Hollywood's private spaces lent her claims a credibility that mere gossip did not have. She said, "You think your favorite star is loyal? Please, I've seen them drop their pants between takes." Henderson continues, this sort of specific allegation, implying direct personal knowledge of sexual behavior on production sets, turned vague rumor into credible testimony. Rivers positioned herself not as someone repeating gossip, but as someone reporting observed reality from within Hollywood's normally closed environments. These reactions from Carson became part of the viewer experience, as his visible discomfort created another layer of tension in audiences who watched him try to keep the show moving forward while clearly concerned about possible repercussions from the celebrities Rivers was discussing. This dynamic created a meta-narrative about the gap between public image and private reality in entertainment. Johnny looked frozen. She kept going. This observation captures the power dynamic that developed during Rivers' most revealing moments. What made Rivers' revelations particularly significant was how they exposed the machinery behind celebrity image-making, revealing not just individual stars' misbehavior, but the systematic deception involved in presenting sanitized versions of celebrities to the public. By discussing plastic surgery, studio cover-ups, and manufactured relationships, she pulled back the curtain on Hollywood's entire apparatus of image management. She had no filter and no fear, especially when she was naming names. Number 4. Zsa Zsa Gabor. The scandalous socialite Zsa Zsa Gabor brought European frankness to American television that shattered the medium's puritanical pretenses. She treated Carson's audience to unapologetic discussions of her romantic adventures that violated every unwritten rule about how women, particularly glamorous women, were supposed to discuss their intimate lives on network television. Gabor admitted she had 9 husbands and twice that many lovers, explained celebrity historian Rebecca Santos. What made her candor particularly striking wasn't just its content, but its presentation. Gabor discussed her extensive romantic history not with shame or embarrassment, but with pride and amusement, treating her relationships as achievements rather than secrets. Unlike her American brethren, who usually kept up at least the appearance of rectitude, Gabor brought a peculiarly European urbanity to the airwaves. She demonstrated the worldly sophistication of a woman unencumbered by American puritanism and genuinely bewildered by the expectation that beautiful women weren't sexually active. This was continental behavior that she carried over into her interactions with Carson himself, flirting with him openly in a manner inconsistent with the usual decorum of the host-guest relationship. Rather than keeping a respectful distance from him, Gabor treated their conversations as preludes to romance, a tension which often delighted and sometimes flustered the normally unflappable host. She flirted with Johnny live, called him a man with a big microphone and a small knee, Santos recalls. The sexual innuendo, delivered with Gabor's accent and theatrical timing, created moments where the audience understood she was suggesting far more than the literal meaning of her words. This technique allowed her to discuss sexuality while technically complying with broadcast standards. Her physical presence on the show reinforced this. She touched Carson, adjusted her clothes to highlight her figure, and gestured with exaggeration to draw attention to her body. She once slapped a guest off camera before walking on, note Santos. Though not seen by viewers, the backstage incident sparked electricity that carried into her on-camera appearance. The knowledge among those in the studio audience that real conflict had occurred added tension and authenticity. Gabor brought real-world drama into the usually so controlled environment. What separated her from straightforward provocateurs, however, was in how her public and private selves came together. She wasn't acting or faking outrage. She was just herself sans any self-censorship. Number 5. Red Fox. The racial truth-teller, Red Fox brought something into The Tonight Show that had largely been excluded from network television. He delivered unfiltered black perspectives on race, sexuality, and American hypocrisy without the self-censorship usually demanded of black performers in white-dominated media. His appearances represented those rare moments of real racial discourse across an otherwise sanitized television landscape. As cultural historian Dr. Robert Thompson will explain, Fox told explicit sex jokes on live TV and called out racial double standards. But what really made his approach revolutionary wasn't the content. He refused to accommodate white comfort. He talked about race and sexuality on network television with the same forthrightness he did in black nightclubs, and network television temporarily had to meet his standards rather than expecting him to meet theirs. Unlike many black performers who adopted separate personas for white and black audiences, Fox was consistent across contexts. He brought to Carson the same voice he brought to the adult comedy albums marketed largely to black audiences. This element of authenticity ran against television's demand that black performers soften themselves. "I've had more white women than Johnny's had monologues," he once said. Thompson explains, the joke simultaneously challenged taboos, racial assumptions, and professional hierarchies. The audience gasped. Nervous laughter became part of the moment itself. The audience gasped. Johnny turned red. This captured how Fox's honesty shattered television's polite fictions about race. The visible discomfort of Carson was a mirror of the broader social discomfort with open racial dialogue. What made Fox's honesty especially significant was its challenge to the exclusion of authentic black experience by television. Number 6. Oliver Reed. The dangerous guest. Oliver Reed brought to American television something it rarely saw: real, unmanaged danger. For this British actor, The Tonight Show was not a place to promote himself. It was a continuation of the arena for unbridled self-expression. Reed was drunk, aggressive, and unpredictable on the show, recalls film historian Margaret Collins. What distinguished him from merely provocative guests was his authentic volatility. Carson wasn't just managing inappropriate commentary. He was managing potentially explosive human behavior, which could spiral beyond the controls of television. Unlike the polished versions of themselves American celebrities had learned to present, Reed brought raw British frankness mixed with heavy drinking. He hit on female guests, challenged Carson to a fight, and rambled about London orgies, Collins explains. These were not only verbal provocations, but behaviors that threatened the broadcast itself. Reed had no regard for television's unwritten rules. Where most guests instinctively understood limits, Reed behaved on The Tonight Show as he did in pubs. This collision between his authenticity and broadcast containment produced moments of real tension seldom seen on scripted television. His honesty exposed how artificial most celebrity appearances really were. Shelley Winters later threw a drink in his face backstage. Unseen on camera, this incident showed real-world consequences of Reed's lack of restraint. His behavior created not just content issues, but interpersonal fallout. What made Reed's honesty significant was how it revealed television's inability to fully contain authentic human behavior. He wasn't just too honest. He was dangerous. His presence created a viewing experience closer to live theater than controlled broadcasting. Reed's appearances demonstrated the entertainment value of unpredictability at a time when television prized control. They foreshadowed reality television's later fascination with unmanaged behavior. This contrast between Reed's British approach and the careful management of American television magnified cultural differences in standards of entertainment. Where British media more readily tolerated raw human behavior, American television required self-censorship. His appearances showed that broadcast rules were cultural choices, not universal truths.